Episode 5. The Wrong Locker. Nell Harrow. We did not open the red box on the step. That would have been dramatic, and drama is usually where people make their worst decisions. Instead, we got into the car like two women leaving a funeral they had not agreed to attend. Elise slammed her door hard enough to make the whole frame shudder. I put the bag with the ledgers on the back seat, set the red tin carefully in the footwell, and started the engine with hands that were only shaking a little. Neither of us spoke. The estate slid past in the windscreen with its usual small humiliations. Pebble dash, satellite dishes, a child's scooter left on a path, a man washing his van with the solemn commitment of someone avoiding his own house, ordinary life continuing at full volume a few feet away from whatever had just tried to widen itself through our family. I drove to the end of the road, turned left, made it as far as the old parade of shops before Elise said, "Pull over." I did, not because she sounded unwell, because she sounded precise. I parked in a lay-by beside a boarded-up hairdresser and killed the engine. For a moment she just sat there, both hands flat on her knees, breathing through her nose like she was trying not to punch a wall. Then she said, "She kept records on me." Yes, she kept records on me like I was a faulty boiler. I looked straight ahead. Yes. And you knew she was hiding things? Yes. And you said nothing? That one I deserved. I let it sit for a second. Then, I knew she was hiding something. I didn't know it was that. Elise turned to me. You didn't know she was tracking whether I answered in my sleep? No. You didn't know she had a file called First Responses? No. You didn't know she'd basically turned my childhood into a containment strategy? No. Her face tightened. Not because she thought I was lying, because the truth was not better. Outside, someone pushed a trolley past the off-license. A gull landed on a lamppost and screamed at nothing. The world remained offensively functional. Elise laughed once, short, empty. Brilliant. I know. No, you don't. That was fair. I looked at her then. Really looked. She had gone grey around the mouth. Her hair had come loose at one side. There was soot on her sleeve from the fireplace, and a faint red mark on one cheek where I had slapped her back into herself. She looked furious, betrayed, exhausted, and about 5 minutes away from either crying or setting something on fire. All sensible responses. I left first, I said. She frowned. What? You said that yesterday. That I got out first. You were right. Her expression changed, but only slightly. I'm not doing a feelings debrief in a lay-by, Nell. No, nor am I. I'm saying you were right. That shut her up for a moment. I went on before I could decide not to. I knew the house was wrong. I knew Mum was managing something. I knew Nan's rules were not just old woman habits. But I left, and once I'd left, I did what people do. I turned distance into a theory. Told myself if I wasn't in the house, then the house was the problem, not us. Elise stared at the windscreen. That sounds like you. Yes. And now? Now I think Mum built her whole life around keeping that room narrow enough for us to grow up beside it without understanding what was next door. Elise swallowed. That isn't noble. No. It isn't love either. No. We sat with that, because some truths come in ugly pairs. She may have been protecting us, she may also have been using us. Both can be true. Families are efficient that way. After a while, Elise nodded toward the footwell. Open it. I looked down at the red tin. Small, scratched, old-fashioned. The sort of thing people keep spare buttons in, or ration cards, or letters they never posted. It had a faded biscuit brand on the lid under the scratches, almost worn away. Here. Unless you'd prefer another haunted room. Fair point. I picked it up and set it between us. The metal was cold, but not like the key had been. Not river cold, house cold, cupboard cold. A thing kept shut for years in the dark. Elise watched my hands. Do you think it's trapped? In what sense? In the sense that if you open it, something ancient and administrative gets in the car. I'd like to say no. That is not reassuring. No. The lid had no lock, just a friction fit. I slid my thumb under the edge and lifted. It stuck for a second, then gave. Inside were 4 things: a bundle of index cards tied with string, a small brass key, a photograph folded once down the middle, and a cassette tape. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then Elise said with genuine offense, "A cassette tape?" Yes. She contained the supernatural with stationery and obsolete media. That does sound like her. I took out the cards first. Each one had a date in our mother's handwriting and a short heading in block capitals. If Nell returns alone, if Elise hears knocking again, if both girls come back, if the keeper speaks. That last one made my stomach turn. Not because of the word, because she had written it as if it were inevitable. Elise. I can read. Yes, but I'm unhappy. Same. I untied the string. The top card was the one about both of us. I read aloud. If both girls come back, do not let them separate in the house. Do not let Eleanor stay once she starts asking the room direct questions. Do not let Elise stand in line with mirror, grate, and doorway. If the red box is opened, they have already seen too much. Elise gave a short laugh. Well, that's encouraging. I turned the card over. There was more. Tell Eleanor the room was never the only opening. Tell Elise she was never chosen because she was weak. If they are both alive to read this, then Margaret bought me more time than I deserved. That landed harder than I expected. Not because it was tender. It wasn't. Even dead, our mother wrote like she was filing a complaint against fate. But it was the nearest thing yet to admission. Nan had bought time. Mum had spent it. On us, perhaps. Around us, certainly. I set that card aside and picked up the one marked, "If the keeper speaks." My hands were steady now. That worried me. I read, "If it speaks itself, stop trying to understand the room as a haunting. It is an office. The dead are not trapped there. They are entered. Rook is a carrier only. The keeper confirms, balances, and calls debt by name. Do not bargain unless you know what was promised before you were born." Elise let out a breath. "Office," she said. "That's disgusting." Yes. It's worse than evil. Yes. Evil I understand. Filing systems for the dead can get in the sea. I almost smiled. Almost! I kept reading. If it has seen Eleanor clearly, it will test her with accuracy. If it has seen Elise clearly, it will test her with invitation. Neither test is honest. Both are binding if answered. That matched too neatly. Me with names, facts, patterns, Elise with voice, recognition, response. The whole family reduced to vulnerabilities and functions. Witness, threshold, accuracy, invitation. It made me want to burn every record we had and every record they had ever kept on us. "Read the rest," Elise said. I did. The keeper does not want the house. The house is only a narrowing. What it wants is continuity. I stopped. Elise looked at me. What does that mean? I thought of the seam, the ledgers, the ordered dark, the figure at the stand or lectern beyond the sailors. The phrase account deferred is not account forgiven. It means, I said slowly, this isn't about getting into the house. It's about keeping the line going. Her face changed. No. Yes. No. Yes? You mean through us. I looked down at the card. I mean through family. She turned away and stared out of the window at the boarded-up hairdresser as if it had personally offended her. Well, that can absolutely get stuffed. Agreed. I set the cards in my lap and picked up the photograph. Old print, glossy once, dulled now. Folded through the middle so hard the image had nearly cracked. I opened it carefully. 3 women stood in the back garden of our mother's house. Nan on the left, arms folded, expressions severe enough to curdle milk. Mum in the middle, younger than I remembered her ever looking. One hand on the shoulder of a child, just out of frame. And on the right, a woman I did not know. Tall, dark coat, hair pinned back, face plain enough to disappear in a crowd, and sharp enough not to. On the back, in Mum's handwriting, Margaret Eliza, Mrs. Vale, 1989, the year we narrowed it again. Elise. She leaned over. Who's that? No idea. Mrs. Vale sounds fake. Yes. It sounds like someone who arrives with folders. Yes. We looked at the photo again. Not family, not friend, not neighbour. She stood too formally for all three, slightly apart but not excluded, like someone brought in for a purpose and not invited to stay for tea. I set the photograph down and picked up the brass key, smaller than the sitting room key, newer, a filing cabinet key maybe, or a cash box. There was a tag tied to it with old white string. On the tag in Mum's block capitals, station locker. I frowned. Elise frowned too. What station? No idea. Peterborough? Maybe. Why would Mum have a station locker? That is an excellent question. The cassette tape sat in the tin like an accusation. Clear plastic case, handwritten label, for Eleanor. Play away from the house. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Of course she had left me a tape. Of course she had chosen the least emotionally efficient medium possible. Elise. Yes. If you laugh, I'll leave you in this lay-by. I'm not laughing. I'm furious in analog. Fair. I turned the cassette over. No further label, no date. Just that instruction. Play away from the house. Meaning she expected the house to listen. Or answer. Or both. I put the tape back in the tin and looked at the road ahead. A bus went by. Someone on the top deck stared blankly down at us and kept going. The sky had darkened slightly, afternoon already starting its slow slide toward evening. Not good. We were on a clock now, not a mystical one, a practical one, the sort our mother respected most. Elise. What? We need a cassette player. She stared at me. A what? Yes. In the year 2026? Yes. She rubbed both hands over her face. I hate this family. Yes. I hate this story. Yes. I especially hate that the dead have better admin than the living. That's fair. She dropped her hands and looked at me properly. What do we do first? Good question. We had 2 ledgers, a red box, a tape for me, a key for a station locker, a photograph of Nan, Mum, and a woman called Mrs. Vale. Confirmation that the keeper wanted continuity, not just access, and a house we could not safely go back into before we understood more. I looked at the cassette again, then the key, then the cards. We find a tape player, I said. We hear what Mum thought was important enough to leave in her own voice. Then we work out what station locker means before dark. Elise nodded once, then she said, And if the house calls? I thought of the upstairs frosted glass, the shape behind it, the seam, the voice using David, the keeper speaking itself. Then we don't answer. I started the engine. And from the back seat, from inside the bag where both ledgers lay pressed together in the dark, something knocked once. The knock from the back seat was not loud. It did not need to be. Once you have heard a sound in the wrong place often enough, volume stops mattering. Meaning takes over. Elise turned slowly in her seat and stared at the bag as if she could intimidate it into behaving. That, she said, can stop immediately. It did not. Nothing else followed. No second knock, no rustle of pages. Just that one tidy reminder that the ledgers were still back there, pressed together in the dark like 2 people in a queue who had recognized each other and were pretending not to. I pulled back onto the road. We need somewhere quiet, I said. We need somewhere with electricity and no ghosts. Yes. And a cassette player. Yes. She folded her arms. I'm going to say something I never thought I'd say. Go on. I miss normal crime. That nearly got a smile out of me. Nearly. We drove in silence for a few minutes while I thought through practical options. The hotel was out. Absolutely not. The house was worse. My flat was too exposed. And besides, if the ledgers had started answering one another in a car, I was not bringing them into another domestic space without a better reason than optimism. That left neutral ground. or as near to neutral as we were likely to get. Storage unit, I said. Elise looked at me. What? The old unit I used when I cleared David's office after the split. You still have that? Yes. Why? Because cancelling things requires hope. She stared at me for a second. That is one of the bleakest things you've ever said. Yes. Also annoyingly sensible. Also yes. The unit sat on the edge of an industrial estate near Fengate, behind a tyre place and opposite a kitchen showroom that had been opening soon for at least 4 years. Roller shutters, CCTV, keypad gate, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look recently exhumed. Perfect. I parked outside the unit door and killed the engine. The sky had gone that washed-out steel colour that means the afternoon is already thinking about leaving. Too early for dark, not early enough for comfort. Elise got out first and stood with her hands in her coat pockets, looking around the estate with open suspicion. This is grim. That's why I like it. That is not a recommendation. I unlocked the unit. Inside, metal shelving, stacked archive boxes, an old desk, 2 folding chairs, 1 dead lamp, and a portable plug-in radio cassette player I had not touched in years. Elise stopped in the doorway and looked at it. You are joking. No. You actually had one. Yes. You own a haunted storage unit and a cassette player. It isn't haunted. She looked at the bag in my hand. It is now. Fair. I set the bag with the ledgers on the desk and did not open it. The red tin beside it, the cassette player at the far end, as much distance as the room allowed. Then I plugged the machine in. Nothing happened. Of course. I checked the socket, flicked the switch, hit the power button again. The radio crackled to life in a burst of static and half a local advert. Elise let out a breath. Well, that's revoltingly reassuring. I opened the cassette case. The tape inside looked ordinary, clear reels, brown tape, white handwritten label. For Eleanor. Play away from the house. I turned it over once in my hand, then slid it in. The machine accepted it with a clunk that felt older than both of us. Elise, I said, if this is her... I know. No, if this is actually her voice, not the thing using it. I know. I pressed play. For a second there was only hiss. Tape hiss, room hiss, the faint electrical hum of cheap fluorescent lights and old machinery doing their best. Then a click, a breath, and our mother said, if this has reached you, then something has gone badly wrong, and I expect by now both of you have made it worse. Elise sat down hard on the folding chair. I stayed standing, not because I was stronger, because if I sat, I might not get up again. The voice on the tape was unmistakably hers. Not the mimic from the room, not the thing in the mirror. Our mother as she had actually been. Dry, clipped, intelligent, tired, and already annoyed at having to explain herself. I am making this recording because written instructions are useful, but there are some things I do not trust to paper if the house is already listening. If Eleanor is hearing this alone, then she has ignored at least 3 sensible warnings and is probably being smug about it. If Elise is with her, then matters are worse, but perhaps not hopeless. Elise made a broken little laugh and immediately covered her mouth with her hand. I did not move. The tape went on. You will want explanations. You are entitled to some, not all. Some things are dangerous because they are hidden. Others are dangerous because they are named too clearly. Learn the difference. A pause. Paper moving, perhaps. Or her adjusting the machine. Then, the room at the back of the house is not the source. It is a narrowing point. My mother inherited it. I inherited it. Neither of us chose it. That does not alter the work. Work. Of course she called it work. The people you have seen are not haunting in the childish sense. They are attached to an account. Not money, not sin if that is where your mind has gone. Record, witness, unfinished transfer. The dead do not always leave cleanly. Some must be entered, carried, balanced, or called. There are families involved in that process. Ours is one of them. Elise whispered. Jesus Christ. No, Mum said on the tape with perfect timing. Nothing so grand. I shut my eyes. Even dead and pre-recorded, she could still win a room. She continued. The Omant women are not mediums. I dislike that word. It attracts idiots. We are witnesses first. Sometimes keepers of sequence. Sometimes thresholds, though that has been rarer and more dangerous. Margaret believed the line had thinned by my generation. She was wrong. Elise looked at me. I looked back. Threshold. Confirmed. Not metaphor. Not accident. The tape clicked softly as it turned. I did not tell you because I was trying to keep the shape of your lives intact for as long as possible. You may decide that was cowardice. You will not be entirely wrong. But understand this clearly. Children who know they are being watched by the dead become useful to the wrong people very quickly. That landed. Not absolution. Not even apology. But something nearer motive than we had yet had. Then, if the keeper has spoken itself, then the account has turned and the narrowing has failed beyond the house. If that is so, you must find Mrs. Vale. I leaned forward. Elise did too. There are not many people left who understand the old offices properly, and fewer still I would trust not to romanticize them. Vale is practical. Unpleasant, but practical. She helped Margaret narrow the line in 1989 after an incident at the river yard that should have finished us. It did not. The photograph. The year we narrowed it again. Mum went on. She will not help you for free. Of course she won't, Elise muttered. No, Mum said from the tape as if hearing her. Of course she won't. I almost laughed. Almost. There is a station locker in Peterborough. Left luggage annex, old side, not the main concourse. If the key is still in the red box, then I did not lose my mind before the end, which is gratifying. In that locker is a case file, a parish map, and Vale's last known address. There may also be a tape marked for Margaret. Do not play that one unless you have no better option. I looked at the brass key on the desk. Station locker. Confirmed. Then the tape voice sharpened. Listen carefully now. If Elise has begun to hear invitation directly, she must not be left alone near reflective glass, standing water, or any doorway that has recently been named. I know how absurd that sounds. Absurdity is not a defence. Elise swore softly. I said, You all right? No. Fair. The tape continued. If Eleanor has begun to hear accuracy used against her, she must stop asking direct questions of anything that answers too quickly. The keeper does not lie in the usual sense. It arranges truth in the order most useful to itself. That was useful. Horrible, but useful. Then came the first real fracture in our mother's voice. Small. Barely there. A breath held too long before the next sentence. If I have died before telling you any of this properly, then I am sorry for the shape in which it reaches you. Elise went still. I did too. It was not much. Not enough for films. Not enough for forgiveness. But from her, it was enormous. A crack in concrete. A hand through a locked door. The tape hissed softly. Then she recovered herself. Do not make sentiment out of that. It wastes time. Elise laughed then. A real laugh this time, sudden and wet with tears she was trying not to admit to. Oh God, there she is. Yes, there she was. Mum went on. The keeper's interest is continuity, not entry. Remember that. It does not need a dramatic opening. It needs a line that keeps answering. If it cannot widen the house, it will widen the family. If it cannot widen the family, it will seek another office nearby. That must not happen. I felt the room shift around that sentence, not supernaturally, strategically. This was bigger than us, but not infinitely bigger. It had rules, preferences, dependencies. That meant it could be delayed, narrowed, maybe even redirected. Not destroyed, perhaps, but managed. That was the first hopeful thought I'd had in hours, which is to say it was probably dangerous. Then the tape said, There is one more thing you need to know about threshold. Neither of us breathed. It is not weakness. It is permeability with memory intact. That is why it is rare. Most people who open do not remain themselves long enough to matter. Elise did. Elise stared at the cassette player as if it had hit her. I looked at her. She did not look back. Mum's voice softened, not by much, but enough. She was never the fragile one. She was the one who kept hearing and returned anyway. That one landed clean. No defense against it. No sarcasm. No place to put it except straight into the center of the body. Elise wiped at her face angrily. I hate this. Yes. I especially hate that she waited until after death to get almost nice. Yes. The tape clicked again. If you are hearing this, go to the station. Retrieve the locker contents. Then find Vale before dark tomorrow if you can. If you cannot, do not go back to the house at night under any circumstances, no matter who calls you there. A pause. Then, very quietly. And if David Harrow is still in Eleanor's life, keep him away from the house. He is the kind of man who would try to fix a thing by standing in front of it, and the dead admire that sort of stupidity. I stared at the machine. Elise turned to me slowly. Oh, she really did know you. Yes. That is brutal. Yes. The tape was nearly done. Final hiss. Small mechanical whir. Then, I expect by now you are both angry. Good. Anger is adhesive. Use it to stay yourselves. Do not confuse understanding with permission. Do not answer politeness with politeness. And if you meet Vale, do not let her smoke in enclosed spaces. She does it on purpose. A breath. Then the last line. Drive carefully. Peterborough is full of idiots. The tape clicked off. Silence. Not haunted silence. Human silence. The kind that comes after hearing the dead speak in a way that leaves no room for pretending they were only ever one thing. Elise sat with both hands over her mouth. I stood very still beside the desk, one hand braced against it, staring at the stopped reels. After a while she said, muffled, I don't know whether to cry or throw that machine through the wall. That sounds healthy. No, it doesn't. No. I ejected the tape carefully and put it back in its case, and then I looked at the key, the photograph, the index cards, Mrs. Vale, left luggage annex, old side, not the main concourse, and before dark tomorrow. We go to the station, I said. Elise nodded once, then looked at the bag with the ledgers. Do they come with us? I looked at the bag. As if in answer, something inside it shifted. Not a knock this time, a slow, dry slide of cover against cover. Yes, I said. I'm not leaving them here. That feels like a terrible decision. It probably is. She stood up. So that's the plan? For now? And after the station? We find Mrs. Vale. Elise looked toward the unit door where the late afternoon light had gone flatter and dimmer. And if she's dead? I picked up the red tin and the key. Then, I said, we have a worse evening than the one we were already having. I switched off the cassette player. At once, from somewhere outside the unit, not near, not far, just beyond the thin metal walls of the industrial estate, came the sound of 3 measured knocks. Not on our door, not on any door I could place. Just 3 knocks moving through the estate as if something had arrived and was checking addresses. Elise looked at me. That's new. No, I said, that's following. Peterborough Station at dusk is not a place that invites reflection. It invites delay, bad coffee, and the quiet suspicion that every announcement is lying to you in a cheerful voice. By the time we got there, the sky had flattened into that dirty blue-grey that belongs to late afternoon in March. Not dark yet, close enough to make every pane of glass feel more interested than it should. The station forecourt was busy in the usual irritated way. Taxis edging forward, people dragging cases, someone smoking too close to the entrance while pretending not to. I parked in short stay. Elise looked at the station, then at me. If anything in there says my name, I'm setting fire to public infrastructure. That feels disproportionate. No, it doesn't. Fair. I slung the bag over my shoulder, red tin in one hand, station key in my coat pocket. The ledgers had been quiet all the way from the storage unit, which I distrusted more than the knocking. Silence from dangerous things is often just timing with better manners. Inside, the station was exactly what stations always are. Too bright overhead, too dirty at floor level, full of people moving with private urgency. The departure board flickered. A child cried near the ticket barriers. Somewhere a coffee machine screamed milk into foam. The smell was wet coats, diesel memory, and pastry pretending to be food. Ordinary, useful, crowds make certain kinds of haunting harder. Not impossible, just less elegant. We moved through the concourse without speaking. Elise stayed close enough that our sleeves brushed once when someone with a suitcase cut between us. Good. Mum had said not to separate. I had no intention of testing whether death had improved her judgment. The left luggage annex was not on the main concourse. That much, at least, was true. It sat off the older side corridor, near what used to be the parcels office, past a shuttered news kiosk and a row of framed railway posters nobody looked at anymore. The corridor lighting was dimmer there. Older fittings, fewer people, the station's public face thinning into its service bones. I felt it before I saw the sign. Not supernatural. Familiar. The same sensation as the passage to the little sitting room. Not identical. Related. A narrowing in the atmosphere. A sense that this bit of architecture had been more useful than decorative for longer than anyone admitted. Elise slowed. You feel that? Yes. That's not encouraging. No. At the end of the corridor was a small door with wired glass and a sign that read, Left luggage, / storage, annex, staff access only. The sign beneath it said the service had been discontinued. Of course it had. Nothing useful in this story was ever still officially open. I tried the handle. Locked. I took out the brass key from the red tin. Elise looked at it. Please tell me that's too obvious to work. It probably is. It worked. The lock clicked with a neat, almost cheerful sound. I hated it. Inside was a narrow room with metal lockers along 2 walls, a counter at the far end, and a smell of dust, old paper and radiator heat. One strip light buzzed overhead. Another had died years ago and been left in place out of habit or budget. The place looked less abandoned than paused, like someone might come back from lunch in 1998 and ask what we were doing there. I shut the door behind us, not because I wanted privacy, because I wanted one less line of sight. The lockers were numbered with old black-on-white plastic tabs. Some doors hung slightly crooked. Others had rust at the hinges. Most had no locks anymore. The key tag said only station locker. Helpful. Any idea which one? Elise asked. No. Excellent. I looked around the room. Counter, notice board. Old timetable pinned beneath newer notices. A dead wall clock stuck at 14:17. Dust thick on the top row of lockers, thinner lower down where someone had disturbed it more recently. That was something. I moved along the row slowly. Don't do that, Elise said. What? The thing where you go quiet and start noticing details. It means something awful is about to become relevant. Yes, that isn't a denial. No. Locker 12 had a cleaner edge around the handle. Locker 14 had a newer padlock, but not our key type. Locker 27 had a scrape mark beneath the keyhole and less dust on the vent slats. I stopped there. Why that one? Because someone's touched it in the last year. Elise looked at the dust, then at me. I hate when you're useful. I know. I put the key in. It fitted. Of course it did. The lock turned stiffly. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then I opened the locker. Inside was a brown archive case with a carry handle, a flat cardboard tube tied with string, and a single envelope propped upright against the back wall. The envelope was addressed in our mother's handwriting. If you found this before Vale did, good. Elise let out a breath that was almost a laugh. She really was unbearable. Yes. I took the envelope first. Inside was one folded sheet. Eleanor, if you are reading this, Then either I judged the timing correctly, or Mrs. Vale has become lazy. I am not sure which possibility is more offensive. The case contains what you need to understand the yard, the house, and the line between them. The tube contains the older map. Do not unfold it near water if you can help it. The ink runs. Vale's last address is in the green folder. If she has moved, ask at St. John's Yard. Someone there will know where she smokes now. Ask where she smokes now. Not lives, not works. Smokes, of course. There was one more line at the bottom. If the collector has begun appearing away from the house, do not let Elise wait alone on platforms. I folded the note back up. Elise had seen enough of my face to know. What? Mum says don't leave you alone on platforms. She stared at me. Why? I imagine because she enjoyed variety. That is not an answer. No. I set the note on the counter and lifted out the archive case. Heavy. Not impossibly so. Paper heavy. File heavy. The weight of explanation in administrative form. The latches were old brass. I opened them. Inside were folders, each labelled in our mother's hand. Riveryard/1989. Incident. Room holding notes. Vale correspondence. Rouquet. Omant line/private. Transfer failures. Elise looked into the case and said with heartfelt disgust, transfer failures. Yes. That is a phrase no one decent should ever have cause to write down. Yes. I took out the green folder first. Vale correspondence. Inside were 6 letters, 2 typed, 4 handwritten, all between our mother and Mrs. Vale over nearly 15 years. The first page gave us what we needed fastest. An address in March. A terrace in Newark. Not Peterborough. Not close enough for convenience. Elise saw it over my shoulder. Newark? Yes. That's miles. Yes. Can we not have one local occult administrator? Apparently not. I kept reading. The letters were brisk, acid, and practical in a way that made me instantly believe the woman in the photograph was exactly who Mum said she was. No mysticism, no poetry, just terms, warnings, and occasional insults disguised as observations. One line from Vale underlined twice. Your daughter is not weak. She is conductive. Stop speaking of her as if fragility were the issue. I showed Elise. She read it and looked away at once. Right, she said. Well? I hate her less than I expected. Same. Another line from a later letter. If the witness begins naming without sight, the keeper is testing the perimeter. Narrow the mirrors and reduce the written record. That matched too neatly with everything already happening. I set the correspondence aside and opened the folder marked ROOKE. Inside, photocopies, clippings, notes, dates. A photograph of a man in a dark coat outside a registry building. Another of the Riveryard fence. A typed summary paper-clipped to the front. I read the first paragraph aloud. Rook is not singular in the ordinary sense. The name appears to pass by office rather than blood. Carrier, registrar, retrieval function. Seen in different decades with little visible aging, though this may be title rather than person. Elise blinked. Sorry, what? I think Rook may be a role. A role? Yes. Like postman. In a way. That is vile. Yes. I kept going. Rook does not initiate. He attends transfer irregularities, witness failures, and balance disputes. Avoid direct bargains. He has authority to carry, not to forgive. That last word again. Forgive. As if debt were moral and clerical at once. I put the Rook file down and took out the cardboard tube. The string came away easily. Inside was an old parish map, hand-marked in red and blue pencil, folded around a tracing paper overlay. I spread it carefully across the counter. Peterborough and its older edges. The river. The yard. The hotel. Our mother's house. And lines between them. Not roads. Not property boundaries. Sight lines. Older routes. Watercourses now buried or diverted. Former parish edges. Places where names had changed but the underlying shape had not. The house sat on one of those lines. So did the yard, so did the station. I stared at the map. Elise leaned in. Oh no. Yes. No, I mean really no. Yes. The station too? Yes. She looked around the annex as if the room itself had just become personally offensive. This is not random. No. The old side corridor, the service bones of the station, the left luggage annex, not just convenient hiding place. Another narrowing point, smaller than the house perhaps, weaker, but connected. That explained the feeling in the corridor before we came in, and it explained why Mum had chosen this locker. Not just secrecy, proximity to the line. I looked back at the map. 3 marked circles in red pencil. Yard, house, station, and 1/4 further out, marked only with initials. SJY. St. John's Yard. The place Mum had mentioned for finding Vale if she moved. Not just a contact point then. Another node. Another place on the line. Before I could say any of that, the strip light above us flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Elise went rigid. Nell. I know. No, I mean... She pointed at the wired glass panel in the annex door. There was someone standing outside in the corridor. Not close enough for detail. Just a dark shape, still and upright, visible through the patterned wire glass. Watching. No knock. No rush. Just presence. I stepped sideways for a better angle. The figure moved too, matching me. Not a reflection. Not a passerby. Watching. Elise said very quietly. Is that the collector? I don't know. Can you find out without doing the thing your mother specifically told you not to do? Possibly. That is not confidence. No. I looked back at the map. The station, the house, the yard, St. John's Yard. 4 points, not isolated, but linked. Not a haunting moving from place to place. A network. A system of narrowings and transfers and records, held open by geography, family, and response. The keeper did not need one door. It needed continuity. And suddenly, I understood why the collector had followed us here. Not because we had run, because we had moved to another point on the same line. The figure outside the door lifted one hand, not to knock, to point. Downward. At the floor between us and the counter. I followed the gesture. At first I saw nothing. Then I saw the water. A thin black line seeping slowly from beneath the skirting board, crossing the annex floor toward the map like ink, finding a sentence it had been waiting to join. Elise stepped back at once. Oh, absolutely not. I grabbed the map before the water reached it and rolled it halfway up without caring about neatness. The figure outside the door lowered its hand. Then, through the glass, I heard a voice. Not loud, not muffled either. Perfectly clear. Wrong locker, it said. My blood went cold, because it was David's voice again. And because when I looked back into the open archive case, there was now a second green folder underneath the first one. One I was certain had not been there before. Its label read HVP/Final Continuity. For 1 second I thought I had imagined it, not the voice, not the water, the folder. That is the problem with certain kinds of pressure. The mind starts offering itself as an alternative explanation out of politeness. But the folder was there. Green card. Same type as the Vale correspondence file. Same age, same label style in our mother's block capitals. HVP/Final Continuity. I stared at it. Elise stared at me, staring at it. What? I didn't answer. Then she looked into the case herself and saw it. Oh, no. Yes. What does HVP mean? I did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. She turned to me slowly. Nell. I kept looking at the folder. Not because I wanted to. Because I suddenly understood something I had been avoiding on purpose. The dead do not always use names first. Sometimes they use initials. Sometimes they use institutions. Sometimes they use whatever shape of identity is most current, most useful, most likely to bind. HVP. Not Harrow. Not Harrow Vale Peterborough or any other nonsense my mind tried to offer in self-defense. HVP, security shutters. The present. The living structure around me now, the line widening through current life, not just family history. "Elise," I said, and my voice came out flatter than I intended. "Step away from the case." She did not move. "What does it mean?" "I don't know yet." "That's not true." "No," I said. "It isn't." Outside the annex door, the figure remained perfectly still behind the wired glass. David's voice had gone. No further warning, no persuasion, just that one sentence. "Wrong locker." The black line of water kept moving across the floor. Not fast, not dramatically. A steady, patient seep toward the base of the counter where the map had been. I picked up the second green folder. It was dry, room temperature, ordinary. Again, almost worse. Elise said, "Tell me what HVP means." I looked at her. "It means this isn't staying in the past." That landed. She went pale in a new way. Not family fear. Present tense fear. The kind that understands contagion. "You mean your work?" "I mean current structures, current names, current offices." "You think it can move into businesses?" "I think it can move into anything that holds continuity." The strip light flickered again. The figure outside tilted its head very slightly as if listening for whether I would say more. I didn't. I opened the folder. Inside were only 3 items. A typed sheet, a photocopy of what looked like a company registration extract, and a handwritten note in our mother's hand. I read the note first. If this file is present, then the line has begun seeking continuity through the living office, rather than the family house. This is worse. Burn after reading if you have time. You probably will not. Elise let out a breath that was nearly a laugh. She really knew how to brighten a room. "Yes," I read on. "Do not assume it wants the business itself. It wants what the business provides. Names, thresholds, entries, exits, regular access, and people who answer when called." That made my stomach turn. Security shutters, access, openings, closings, entry points, thresholds as literal daily work. Not symbolic enough to be silly, practical enough to be dangerous. The typed sheet beneath it was headed, "Continuity Risk / Modern Offices." The language was not ours, not Mum's exactly, more formal, maybe copied from Vale, maybe older. I scanned it quickly. "Where hereditary witness lines weaken, continuity may seek administrative replacement through repeat systems of access control, record handling, property transition, or custodial oversight. Modern business structures can provide temporary office-like conditions if family succession is interrupted or resistant. Particular risk attaches where the living office concerns thresholds, keys, barriers, permissions, or managed entry." Elise said, "That's your company." "Yes." "That's literally your company." "Yes." "That is obscene." "Yes." I turned to the photocopy. At first, it looked like nothing. A standard extract, company details, registered name, director information partly blacked out, but in the margin, in blue pen, our mother had written one line. "Not blood, pattern." I stared at it, then read the typed extract again. Not because the information itself mattered, because of what she was telling me to look for. Not blood, pattern. This thing did not need a family tree if it could find a function. It had used the omance because we were there and built for it. If we resisted, if the house narrowed, if the family lines stopped answering, it would look for another office that resembled the old one closely enough to hold the work. And my current life, barriers, access, managed entry, thresholds all day long, was practically waving at it. Elise said very quietly, "Nell." I looked up. She was no longer looking at the folder. She was looking at the annex door. The figure outside had moved closer, close enough now that I could make out the coat. Dark, wet at the hem, hands bare. One resting lightly against the wired glass. No face still. The angle and the distortion kept that hidden. Then it spoke again. Not David this time. My voice. "Don't read the rest." That got me. Not because it sounded like me, because it sounded like me when I was trying not to frighten someone. Low, controlled, tired, practical, useful voice. Trustworthy voice. I hated it instantly. Elise whispered, "That's not fair." "No," the thing at the door said in my voice. "If you understand the pattern fully, it can use the pattern fully." I did not answer, because that was exactly the sort of sentence designed for me. Accurate enough to tempt, incomplete enough to bind. Instead, I looked back at the typed page and kept reading. Temporary continuity through living office remains unstable unless one of the following is present: willing threshold, inherited witness, recorded transfer object, active collector. I felt the room narrow around us, but we had all four. Elise, me, the ledgers, the collector outside the door. Damn it. The note in Mum's hand continued on the back. If you are reading this with both ledgers present and the collector already tracking, do not return to the business premises until Vale has assessed the line. If you ignore this, then at least remove all staff access lists, key records, and site schedules first. I shut the folder. Too late. The annex door rattled once, not a knock. Pressure. The figure outside leaned closer to the glass. Still no face. Just shape, intent, wet cuff. One hand lifted to chest height, as if in patient appeal. "Elise," I said, "take the map tube and the Vale file." She moved at once. Good. No argument. That meant she was frightened enough to be efficient. I took the HVP folder, the note, the registration copy, and shoved them into the case. Then the Rook file. Then the cards. Then the photograph. Not neat, not elegant. Fast. The black line of water reached the place where the map had been and kept going, turning toward the desk instead. Seeking paper, of course it was. The figure at the door spoke again, now in our mother's voice. "If you leave now, it follows the active line." I kept packing, then, in Vale's voice. A voice I had never heard, but knew instantly from the letters somehow, dry as cigarette paper and twice as abrasive. It said, "If you stay, it confirms the office." Elise looked at me. "How can it do voices we haven't heard?" "Pattern," I said, "not memory. That is not better." "No." The strip light went out. The annex dropped into dimness lit only by the corridor spill through wired glass and the weak emergency bulb over the far counter. In that half-light, the figure outside finally gained a face, not because it showed one, because the glass stopped distorting. For 1 second, perfectly clear, I saw a man standing there in a dark coat, middle-aged, pale, expressionless, with water beading on his hair and collar as if he had just stepped out of rain that existed nowhere else in the station. Not David, not Rook, someone administrative enough to be worse. He looked at me and said, in his own voice this time, "You have brought the witness, the threshold, the records, and the modern office to a live point. This is becoming untidy." I stared at him. Elise said, "I'm sorry, did he just complain about tidiness?" "Yes." "I hate him." "Yes." The man outside inclined his head slightly as if acknowledging a minor procedural inconvenience. "Open the door." "No," I said. "You are not authorized to refuse review." "That sounds like a you problem." That got the faintest change in him. Not anger, interest. Good. He looked past me toward the bag. The first account should not have been paired with the second outside supervised transfer. "Again," I said. "Sounds like a you problem." Elise made a noise that might have been a laugh if fear hadn't got there first. The man's gaze shifted to her. At once, the air in the annex changed. Not colder. More expectant. He said, "Threshold." I stepped sideways, blocking his line to her. "No." He did not look at me. "Threshold," he said again. "You have not been entered correctly. Review is required." Elise said from behind me, "That sounds deeply personal and I reject it." "Good girl." The man's eyes moved back to mine. "Witness. If you continue to obstruct, continuity will seek the broader office. HVP. Staff lists, keys, schedules, sites, entry systems. I believed him. That was the problem. Not because he was honest, because he was exact enough to be dangerous. And then I understood the sentence he had used before. Wrong locker and not warning, instruction. He wanted us moved, not here. Somewhere else. Somewhere better for process. This annex was a live point, yeah, but maybe not the one he preferred. I looked down at the archive case. Then at the map. Then at the marked circles. House. Yard. Station. St. John's Yard. And suddenly the fourth point mattered more than the others. SJY. Not just where someone might know where Vale smoked. Another narrowing. Another office. Another place where review could happen. The man outside saw the thought land. His mouth changed by half a degree. Enough. You want us at St. John's Yard? I said. He said nothing, which was answer enough. Elise whispered. Nell, I know. The black water had reached the base of the desk now and was beginning to spread beneath it in branching lines. The ledgers in the bag knocked once together. Not loud. Agreement. Or warning. The man outside said, if you delay, the broader office becomes more attractive. I believed that too. Damn him. I picked up the bag and the archive case in one movement. Elise, door. What? When I say, you have a plan? No. Excellent. I looked at the annex door, at the man beyond it, at the emergency exit sign high on the back wall over a narrow service door I had not noticed before. Of course there was another door. Of course there was always another door. Not because the building was kind, because systems like exits. I said, not that door. Elise followed my gaze. Oh, thank God. I backed toward the service exit, archive case banging against my leg, bag heavy with the ledgers. The man outside turned his head slightly, hearing the shift. For the first time, something like urgency entered his expression. Witness? No. If you leave unreviewed. Yes, I said. Untidy, you mentioned. I hit the crash bar. The service door flew open into a narrow concrete passage smelling of damp brick and old oil. Alarm did not sound. Of course it didn't. Nothing in this story ever gave us the courtesy of public attention. Elise, move. She moved. Fast. Good. No. We went through the service passage and out into the back service lane behind the station just as the annex door behind us slammed open hard enough to hit the wall. I did not look back immediately. That was discipline, not bravery. We got 10 yards into the lane first. Bins, puddles, brick walls, a line of parked maintenance vans. Before I turned. The service door to the annex stood open in the gloom. No one in it. No one in the lane. But on the concrete threshold, neatly placed where we could not have missed it if we'd stayed 1 second longer, was a white card. Even from that distance I could read the block capitals. St. John's Yard before dark. Elise looked over my shoulder. Oh, he can absolutely get in the sea. Yes, I said, but I picked up my pace anyway. Because the worst thing about exact instructions is that sometimes they're right. We did not stop in the service lane. That would have implied confidence, and confidence was in short supply. Instead, we kept moving along the back of the station, past bins, wet brick, and the sort of industrial clutter that only becomes visible when you leave a public building through the wrong door. Elise was half a step ahead of me, which told me 2 things. 1, she was frightened enough to move without argument. 2, she was angry enough to keep going. Both useful. The white card sat in my coat pocket like a threat with good handwriting. St. John's Yard before dark. The sky above the station had darkened another shade. Not night yet, the sort of late afternoon that makes every surface look damp even when it isn't. We had time, technically, which is to say we had just enough time to make a bad decision feel responsible. At the end of the lane, Elise stopped and turned on me. No. I nearly walked into her. No what? No, we are not doing what the wet bureaucrat told us to do. That is a fair objection. It's more than fair. It's the only sane objection available. She was flushed now, breathing hard, hair half out of its tie, the soot mark still on her sleeve. The look in her eyes said she was one sentence away from either crying or committing a minor assault. Also fair. I shifted the bag higher on my shoulder. He may still be right. She stared at me. You cannot say that. I can. You absolutely cannot say the thing stalking us through administrative weak points may still be right, like that's a normal sentence. It isn't normal. It may still be right. That is how traps work. Yes, and sometimes traps are also directions. She closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, she looked tired enough to be honest. I hate when you do this. What? The thing where you sound calm because the situation is impossible. I'm not calm. No, she said, you're organized, it's worse. That was probably true. I took the card out and looked at it again. Cheap white stock, block capitals, no signature, no flourish. The sort of note left by someone who expected to be obeyed and had no interest in style. The collector, if that was what he was, wanted us at St. John's Yard. That made it suspect on principle. But Mum had also pointed us there for Vale if she'd moved, and the map had marked it as a live point on the line. 3 reasons to avoid it. 3 reasons it was probably where we had to go. Elise, I said, if we don't go, what's the alternative? She folded her arms. We leave town. With what? 2 ledgers, a map, a tape, a continuity problem attached to my work, and something already following us away from the house? She said nothing. Or we go back to the hotel. No. Or the house. Absolutely not. Or we find Vale by guessing. That feels doomed. Yes. She looked away down the lane, jaw tight. Then, I still think this is a trap. I agree. That got her attention. You agree? Yes. And you still want to go? Yes. She laughed once, sharp and exhausted. That is appalling. Yes. A beat. Then she said, fine. But if we get there and it turns out to be a ritual slaughter yard run by pensioners, I get to say I told you so while dying. That seems fair. We went back to the car. I drove. Neither of us suggested otherwise. St. John's Yard sat on the older side of the city, in that awkward overlap where church stone, service alleys, and repurposed commercial buildings all pretend they belong together, not far as the map went. Far enough in traffic to feel like time was being shaved off us in thin, irritating strips. Peterborough at that hour had decided to become difficult. Vans where they shouldn't be. A bus taking up moral space, someone indicating right and going left out of spite or confusion. The sky lowering by degrees. Elise watched the streets go by and said, if Vale is dead, I'm blaming Mum. That seems late. I've got a lot to catch up on. Fair. We found St. John's Yard by missing it once. That felt appropriate. A narrow opening between a locksmith and a shuttered charity furniture place led into a small paved yard behind the main street. Old brick on 3 sides, church wall at the back, a smoking area by default rather than design, 2 metal bins, 1 dead hanging basket, a drain in the middle with a rust halo around it, and 3 people in the yard. None of them were Mrs. Vale, at least, not obviously. A man in delivery overalls smoking by the wall, a woman in a cafe apron on her phone, and an old bloke on an upturned crate feeding pieces of a sausage roll to a gull with the concentration of a surgeon. No one looked supernatural. That meant nothing. I parked on the street and we walked in. The moment I crossed into the yard, I felt it. Not the house cold, not the station narrowing. Something drier, a held stillness. A place used often enough for waiting that the air had learned the habit. Elise felt it too. Oh, good, she muttered. It's horrible in a new way. The woman in the apron glanced up, took one look at us, and looked away again in the specific manner of someone who had seen stranger things in this yard and was not being paid enough to care. I said, to no one in particular, Mrs. Vale. The old bloke on the crate pointed with his sausage roll toward a side door, under a faded sign that once might have said, Parish Office. Upstairs, he said. If she's in a mood, wait. If she's not in a mood, still wait. Useful. Thanks. He looked at the bag on my shoulder, then at Elise, then at me. "Don't let her smoke near paper," he said. Elise stopped dead. I looked at him. He tore off another bit of sausage roll for the gull as if he had said nothing remarkable at all. That was enough for me. We went to the side door. Inside, narrow stairwell. Old lino. Smell of stale tea, dust, and nicotine that no amount of repainting had ever truly defeated. The kind of building where every handrail feels like it knows too much. At the top of the stairs was a frosted glass door with peeling black letters. Vale Consultancy. No walk-ins. Elise read it and said, "I already dislike her." "Yes." There was no bell. Of course there wasn't. I knocked once, nothing, and twice. A voice from inside said, "If that's parish finance, die elsewhere." Elise looked at me. I said, "Mrs. Vale?" A pause, then, "Depends who's asking." "Eliza Omant's daughters." Silence, long enough to be deliberate. Then the lock clicked. The door opened inward by 6 inches. Mrs. Vale stood behind it with a cigarette in one hand and a face that looked as if kindness had once visited and been asked to leave. She was older than the photograph by decades and exactly the same person. Hair white now, cut short without softness. Dark cardigan, men's shirt, trousers that had seen better years and not cared. Thin as a wire, eyes sharp enough to strip paint and probably had. She looked at me first, then Elise, then the bag, then the red tin in my hand. Her expression did not change. "Christ," she said, "you do look like her." "Which one?" Elise asked. Vale took a drag on the cigarette. "That depends which of you is asking." Then she opened the door wider. "Get in before something notices you've found the right staircase." We went in. The room beyond looked like an office assembled by someone who distrusted both offices and people. Metal filing cabinets, 2 mismatched chairs, a desk under a window painted shut. Ashtray full but organised, shelves of folders, a kettle on a side table beside 3 mugs, all stained into honesty. No occult clutter, no candles, no symbols, just records. Of course. Vale shut the door behind us and slid the bolt. Then she looked at the bag again. "You brought both books." Not a question. "Yes." Idiotic. "Yes." She nodded once, as if pleased by the answer. Then she pointed the cigarette at Elise. "And you let the threshold walk into a live point after activation." Elise stared at her. "I'm sorry, did everyone in this world agree to be rude before I got here?" Vale ignored that. She looked at me. "Has the keeper spoken itself?" "Yes." "Directly?" "Yes." "Using its own voice?" "Yes." Vale shut her eyes briefly. "Of course it has." She crossed to the desk, stubbed out the cigarette, immediately lit another and said, "Sit down. No, not there. That chair tips." We sat. Not because we trusted her. Because she had the tone of someone who expected to be obeyed by catastrophe itself and was often disappointed. Vale stayed standing. "Eliza should have told you earlier." "Yes," I said. "She thought delay was mercy." "Yes." She was wrong. Elise said, "Thank you." Vale looked at her. "I'm not comforting you. I'm correcting the record." That, oddly, helped. I put the red tin on the desk, then the archive case, then, after a second's hesitation, the bag with the ledgers. Vale watched all 3 with the expression of a woman assessing flood damage. "What has it used so far?" I answered. Mum's voice, David's voice, mine, Elise's, someone at the station, possibly yours. "Not possibly," Vale said. "If it thought I'd be useful, it used me." Elise leaned forward. "What is it?" Vale looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "It is an office that outlived its building." That shut the room up. "Even me," Vale went on. "Long before your family, long before the yard, there were local systems for handling the dead who did not leave cleanly. Not church, not state. Older than both in practice, though they all borrowed from each other when convenient. Records had to be kept. Witnesses had to confirm. Thresholds had to allow transfer without collapse. Most of those systems died when the places that held them died. She tapped ash neatly into the tray. This one didn't, Elise said. How is that better? It isn't. Vale looked at me. Your line didn't create it. Your line inherited responsibility near one of its narrowings. The omens were useful because they could witness without breaking too quickly. Later, occasionally, one of you could also function as threshold. That made your family valuable and miserable in equal measure. She pointed at the bag. The books are not magic objects in the childish sense. They are balancing records. One historical, one domestic, one for what was carried through the yard, one for what was managed through the house. Together they let the office compare, correct, and continue. Elise said, "Burn them." Vale looked at her with something almost like approval. Eventually, perhaps, if you enjoy structural collapse. That was not comforting. I said, "The collector." Vale nodded. "Review function, not the keeper. Think of him as mobile oversight." "Can he move continuity into a business?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Yes," she said again, seeing my face. "If the pattern fits closely enough. Access control, managed entry, repeated thresholds, staff who answer to names on lists. Modern offices are ugly, but they're adaptable." HVP. "Damn it," Elise said. "Can he be stopped?" Vale considered that. "Delayed, redirected, narrowed. Stopped is a childish word." I was beginning to understand why Mum had called her practical. I said, "What does he want from us now?" Vale looked from me to Elise and back again. "The same thing the office always wants when a family line starts resisting. Clarity." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means it wants to know whether you are continuing the work, breaking the line, or forcing transfer." Elise said, "We are not continuing anything." Vale gave her a look. That would matter more if refusal were the only ingredient. The room went still. I said, "What's the other ingredient?" Vale picked up the red tin, opened it without asking, glanced inside, and set it down again. "Capacity," she said. "And unfortunately, between the two of you, there's plenty." That was when I knew the evening had just got worse. Vale crossed to a filing cabinet, unlocked the top drawer, and took out a single buff folder. No label on the front. She laid it on the desk between us. Inside were 3 documents and 1 photograph. The photograph first. A much older image, sepia. 4 women standing outside a stone building that no longer existed. One of them had our family face in an older arrangement. Another I recognized from the line of Vale's jaw. On the back, in faded ink, witness line and threshold line before consolidation. I looked up. Vale was watching me. "Yes," she said. "That's the part Eliza never worked out in full." Elise said, "What part?" Vale tapped the photograph. "The omans were never one line." No one moved, no one breathed properly. Vale went on. "There were 2 working lines, witness and threshold. Separate families, separate functions. Safer that way. They were consolidated generations ago after a transfer failure and a shortage of surviving women with the right tolerance." My mouth had gone dry. "Elise and I are not carrying 2 functions in one line by accident," Vale said. "You're carrying the remains of a merger." Elise stared at her. "That is the least normal sentence anyone has ever said to me." "Yes," Vale said, "and it gets worse." She opened the buff folder to the second document. A family chart. Not neat, not complete, but enough. Names, marriages, deaths, notes in margins. 2 surnames crossing and recrossing over a century until they joined, Omont and Harrow. I stared at it, then at her. Vale met my eyes without sympathy. "Your ex-husband's family name is not incidental." The room dropped out from under me, not literally. Worse, in the way a sentence can alter the architecture of your past. "No," I said. Vale nodded once. "Yes." Elise turned to me so sharply her chair legs scraped. "Nell." I did not look at her. I was looking at the chart. At the crossing lines. At the old names. At the 1 note in the margin beside a Harrow marriage from decades back. Threshold branch re-entered by lawful union. No. Absolutely not, Vale said, with the calm of someone placing a knife on a table between facts. You didn't marry him by chance. The office had already started closing distance. And somewhere below us in the yard outside, someone knocked 3 times on metal.